Hello and welcome to Forever Friday. I'm Alpha Friday, and this video is made to be an introduction to the Godzilla franchise. Whether you're a casual watcher or someone who only knows the name, this video is made to be your guide to better understand the world's biggest movie star. To do this, we will discuss some main staples of the franchise, the different eras of Godzilla films, and finally, Godzilla's characterization throughout the years. I will also give some movie recommendations at the end of the video. Firstly, it's best to understand some common elements and main staples of the franchise. Most Godzilla films follow one of the two following types of movie formulas. That is, the Big Bad Godzilla formula, or the Godzilla vs. formula. The Big Bad Godzilla formula primarily centers around Godzilla as the main focus, and often has a man versus monster approach to the story. It is also common in these types of films that Godzilla represents some sort of allegory, typically a symbol of nuclear destruction. In the latter type, Godzilla is the title monster in films that center on giant monster fights, much like how wrestling and boxing matches promote their fights. There are human plot lines that are inserted into these films, like dealing with greedy businessmen or fighting aliens, but the main draw is the monster battles. These Godzilla vs. films are the most common of the two types, and as a result have introduced many monsters into Godzilla's Rogues and Allies gallery. There are 5 monsters including Godzilla that are seen as the biggest staples of the franchise. These being King Ghidorah, Mothra, Rodan, and Mechagodzilla. They are easily the most reoccurring characters in the franchise, and 2 of them, Rodan and Mothra, were originally created for their own films until they were brought into the Godzilla series. Let's now move on to the many eras of Godzilla films. These eras are identified mostly by the periods of time when Godzilla films were being continuously produced. The first era is referred to as the Showa era. This started with the very first Godzilla movie in 1954, Gojira, the Japanese name for Godzilla. The Showa era produced a total of 15 Godzilla films and ended in 1975 with Terror of Mechagodzilla. The second era of films is known as the Heisei era. This era refers to the 7 films produced between the years 1984 and 1995, starting with The Return of Godzilla and ending with Godzilla vs. Destroyer. Then, after a poorly received American TriStar film, the original Japanese company, Toho, started up a new set of Godzilla films, starting in 1999 with Godzilla 2000. Confusing, I know. This is referred to as the Millennium Era. It produced 6 films and lasted until 2004 with Godzilla Final Wars. Currently, the majority of modern-era Godzilla films is being produced by the American companies Legendary and Warner Brothers, in a giant monster shared universe continuity based off of the MCU model. This started in 2014 with the American film simply titled Godzilla. However, there have been some other Godzilla entries produced recently outside this American series, such as Toho's Shin Godzilla and the Netflix animated trilogy. Lastly, I'd like to discuss Godzilla's characterization throughout the years. Some of you might be confused on whether Godzilla is supposed to be a hero or a villain. Well, that is because Godzilla's character has changed much over time. In the original film, Gojira, Godzilla is portrayed as a giant beast that destroys indiscriminately. Godzilla in this film is supposed to represent a destructive allegory for the nuclear fears that Japan held at the time, and man's struggle against it. However, later, more films were produced, and Godzilla began to fight other monsters, as well as man. This is where the Godzilla vs. type of movies start to appear, with Godzilla playing the part of the heel and more likable monsters like Mothra and King Kong as the hero. But as Godzilla's own popularity increased, there was a push to make him more of a lesser of evils, and introduce bigger and badder monsters like King Ghidorah for him to fight. Eventually, Godzilla came to be seen as a hero in his films, as he fought off the evil monsters. All these changes happened during the Showa era, and although they were not sudden changes, they were quite apparent. Eventually, the Godzilla movies' popularity began to wane in the 70s, being seen as films made for younger audiences. After almost a 10-year hiatus, Godzilla returned in the Heisei series. This reintroduction of Godzilla was more in line with the old destructive monster portrayal of the character, and Godzilla would remain to have this characterization throughout all the Heisei films. Now, depending on the film, he could be seen as a lesser of evils, but he always remained the same big bad monster in this continuity. In the Millennium, however, Godzilla suffered a bit of an identity crisis. This was because there was very little shared continuity between this era of films. Essentially, every film had a different version of Godzilla. Most of them seemed based on the big bad monster portrayal similar to the Heisei era. But some even went further, like how in GMK, Godzilla regained his representation of a type of allegory. In the more modern era, the American Godzilla films represent Godzilla as a sort of heroic, stoic defender to appeal to their cinematic universe concept of the character. But in contrast, the most recent Toho film, Shin Godzilla, portrays him as a destructive nuclear allegory, much like how he was in the original. I hope this explanation has helped you better understand just how malleable a character Godzilla has been throughout the years. Let's wrap this up with some recommendations, shall we? First, it goes without saying that you should watch the original film, Gojira, from 1954. You can watch the American version of the film as well, although some would argue that you're missing out on some of the subtext that is in the original version, but I think it's fine. For the Showa era, I suggest Godzilla vs. Mothra 1964, or Invasion of Astro Monsters 1965. They give a good representation of the older style of Godzilla films. With the Heisei, I would recommend Return of Godzilla 1984 or Godzilla vs. Destoroyah 1995. This is personally my favorite era of Godzilla films, and Destoroyah is one of my favorite films. In regard to the Millennium, I think I would personally suggest Godzilla Against Mechagodzilla 2002 or Godzilla Final Wars 2004, although some would suggest GMK, so you might want to check it out. For the modern era, watch Godzilla 2014 or Shin Godzilla 2016. Although I'd like to note that Shin Godzilla may not be the best first choice, as it does contain a lot of procedural dialogue that comments on its allegorical message, and there is not much action. However, if you do want a film that is more nonsensical and has balls-to-the-wall action, might I suggest Godzilla vs. Megalon 1973. It is Godzilla at its campiest and finest. Anyway, I hope this video has helped you understand the Godzilla franchise a bit better, and that you will be excited to try some of these films soon. Goodbye for now, and have a great Friday.